So, Catherine Teitelbaum is the head of Family Trust for Amazon Kids, but she has had a long and storied career, and I wanted her in particular to come to speak to us today because of that career and what we can learn from just her longevity in the field, her status as a very senior woman leader in trust and safety. So with that, I would love to invite Catherine to the stage. And before I turn this mic over to her, the other thing I'm going to say is this is your first keynote, yes? All right, so the goal of the Trust and Safety Professional Association is to provide professional development to all levels. And I'm so grateful we can give this to you today. So take it away, Catherine.
That is the best intro I've ever had, and it's so silly. I wanted to meet you. Okay, so I joined Trust and Safety, wait for it, just a little over 25 years ago. Yeah. The year was 1997. That year, just to ground us a little bit, Princess Diana died in a car crash. O.J. Simpson was acquitted. The Tamagotchi virtual pet sold out. The iPhone was still 10 years out from launch, and the Palm Pilot was the most sophisticated technology. It was our communication device. And me, I was a teacher. I was teaching middle school just down the road from here, actually, on the peninsula. And at the end of every school year, I would take my middle school students on a field trip to Silicon Valley. We'd tool around, we'd go to the Tech Museum, the Computer History Museum, if it was there yet, I don't know which year it was. And at the end of the trip, we ended the day at Yahoo. I had become very interested in technology. I was interested in the way it empowered my students to communicate with other people, to connect with ideas, to think about things outside of their real-world circles. On our field trip to Yahoo, my students enjoyed the purple conference room. They enjoyed the candy, the sodas, and while they were doing all of that, I kept being pulled out of the conference room, and by employees, and they were asking me questions about their web guide for kids, Yahooligans, that had already launched, and we now call that content appropriateness. But at the time, it ran something like this. Can we share Major League Baseball sites? The kids, we think they'd like the stats. Yeah, sure, kids like baseball stats. Working some math. How about the fact that there's beer advertisements, top, side, and center? Oh, I learned. I was like, this is a little harder than I thought. And over that summer, I kept talking with them and giving free advice. By the start of the next school year, I had a job offer. And at the time, I thought someday I was going to be a principal or a superintendent. That was my goal. So it was really crazy when I went to my family and said, guess what? I'm going to take this job at this company called Yahoo. They all thought it was a drink, and my grandmother was pulling her hair out with but you have tenure. And I did. But I thought it sounded fun. There were purple conference rooms. There was no dress code. I could go to the restroom whenever I wanted. I didn't have to tell anyone. There were product plans on whiteboards, and they sounded like they were impossible. They sounded so cool. There was no homework to grade. There were no lesson plans. I was like, what's not to like? And I was open for an adventure. And I jumped in. Okay, let's fast forward. That was a long time ago. It's been more than a couple decades. And we in this room know better than anyone how content appropriateness, that question has just grown and grown and grown in complexity. And yet we go to work and we frequently hear like, what's the worst that could happen? It's just a website. It's just an app. We're not saving lives. But the thing is, if you're in this room, we are saving lives. It's a lot. We are frequently making decisions. We're writing policies. We're writing code. We're otherwise taking steps that do save lives or address real harms, that protect against fraud, that protect against crime, bullying, harassment, exploitation, and we do this 24/7, 365. It's a lot. Do you find this work overwhelming sometimes? I do. I frequently also find it really humbling. And not infrequently, I have questioned, like, how did a desire to work with children and to educate lead me to where I am right now? And, it's already been mentioned a couple times this morning, like, we have such interesting paths to get here. Was I trained for my trust and safety roles? I think we've already established that no, I was not. There were no graduate degrees or even relevant courses at the time that I was doing this. My combined rhetoric, English, and teaching credentials had to suffice. Were there protocols that I could follow? Well, there are now, and shout out of thanks to all of you who have recently worked on the TSPA guide. Like, there are protocols now. Did I have any personal protective gear to help with resilience? Did I even know the word resilience? No. I think it would be very cool if I could go to work and change into my trust and safety uniform when I get to work about the same way like other first responders do. But there are some best practices that I can and I do follow, and we'll get to that in a bit. Did I know who to call or even when to call for backup? I think, Charlotte, you mentioned, like, we're always feeling like we have to have the answers, and I still feel like I have to have the answers, especially now. I've been doing this a long time. It changes with every role, but there are people in this room right now who I can always call. First responders do not show up alone. Neither should we. So this is my strong nudge. You're in this room. You're going to be out in those rooms. If you do not have at least one person who you can always call, make sure you leave today or tomorrow with that one person. So it's been much more than a minute since I started doing this, and Charlotte asked that I share some insights that I've gained along the way, keeping in mind the seismic amount of change that we are currently experiencing. I have to say, like, this felt like a career honor. I was really touched to be asked. As she mentioned, I have never done a keynote. I do panels, I do other things. I used to get paid to talk for 8 hours a day. I should be able to do this. But I also think, I was like, well, what do I have to share? And what I decided was that this kind of connects with my superpower. And my most heartfelt connection to my career is my ability to mentor. And so with that, I said yes. And then I realized how daunting it was. So thank you, Charlotte. I get to face my fears today. Okay, so I'm going to share with you my 5 key lessons that I have learned in almost 25 years in trust and safety, and I hope this is helpful for you, no matter where you are and what discipline you represent. So I believe our work in trust and safety is equal parts art and science. That's lesson 1. When I started, trust and safety was all art. What do I mean by art? Art is the very human part of our jobs. It's our values, it's our ethics, it's our judgment, it's that gut feeling. It's that innate human ability to look around corners and think not just about what could go wrong or what is going wrong, but also to imagine the ways we could mitigate those happenings, those problems. And then we continue to just look farther. We're the only mammals that can do this. We don't just absorb the facts that are happening right in front of us, the objects that we see, the movement that we see. We just as quickly layer on context. We add on our prior experiences, things we have read about, seen, and then we look forward and we anticipate. We are unique that way, and that is an art. The science part is the technology, and I think we can all agree that's on fire right now. It's always been on fire, but like, wow, the changes we're seeing. The technology is, the science is the technology, it's the data, it's also the laws, it's the regulations, also changing quite a bit, evolving right now. And in some ways, really important ways, the technology has made our work much easier. The tools we use are better than I could have ever imagined. The science can predict, it can prioritize. I think Lori did a great job of highlighting all the really good things that it can do. And the art of trust and safety is still necessary. The human element is still as important as ever. Our judgments are uniquely complex. They're nuanced. The playing field is constantly changing. We've been talking about that a lot. And our creativity and problem solving is unlimited. We will not only go back and try to fix what is not right yet, we'll try to improve something, but we also know when it's the time to do so. So I'd like to share a short story about how I think about this balance. It's about an escalation that stayed with me, and it was an early time in my career, but it was a time when science was better than it had ever been, and yet the art was still needed. There was a fatal car crash not so far from here, and some well-meaning person connected with law enforcement thought it would be a really good idea to publish a blog, include these police photos, in order to warn teenagers about speeding. The blog, along with the photos, started showing up in search results. The teenager's family reached out to us and said, please no, please take those down. It was showing along with the child's name, the location, et cetera, the school. We needed to do some balancing of science and art. On the one hand, we had clear data from our customers, from our users, that they wanted relevant images highlighted in our search results, especially around news, especially around local news. There were no laws that were giving us explicit direction at that time. Our team had some really hard conversations about the role of photos in search results. We needed to develop a point of view on graphic imagery, even for educational purposes. We needed policies, we needed technology to identify, we needed to be able to deal, we needed operational tools to be able to deal with those photos and to think about content moderation in a much more nuanced way than we ever had. Art and science in combination were needed for us to come to the right solution. I want you to think about how far we've come since then. How many of you have your example? I would argue probably most of you have an example that seems simple in retrospect, like that story. It was a pivotal moment. It's one that put a line in the ground that helped me frame future decisions that had higher, more technology, more nuance. We've come so far. We've flexed both art and science, and all of you, regardless of your roles, are part of that. So what's lesson 2? Lesson 2 is if you look around corners, there's really nothing new happening. It may feel that way, but it's not really. At my parents' home in Maine, there is a very large box of t-shirts. There must be close to 50 from my career. And funnily, it's been so long that my now 18-year-old son, he's found a few that are retro cool enough that he actually wears them. Like Party Gras 1999, anyone? And my favorite is he wears my You Hooligans t-shirt. And he's proud of it. And I'm like, oh, that's nice. Isn't that cute? He's going to wear it to college next year. But my favorite t-shirt is the one that I didn't save and I can't forget. And I've quoted it so many times. It's right here. If we build it, they will abuse it. A little like Field of Dreams reference by the Yahoo Paranoids team. It's been a constant truism in my career. And it's really liberating to think that misuse is actually to be expected. If you've ever had a toddler in your life, you know this. Like, it's human nature, push the limits. And it's also been a great reminder to me to not panic. Like, this is supposed to happen. And if I can have a sense of humor about what's happening, that's going to help. It's part of resilience, but we're going to get to that later, too. Interestingly, also, in my career, I have more often than not been recruited to address some unexpected abuse or misuse of a product. Think about that for a moment. Abuse on a product, unexpected usage of a product is a source. It's a top of funnel for us in trust and safety to find jobs. It's the top of the job funnel. Products are being used in ways that weren't anticipated. Because it's easy in hindsight to say things like anonymous messaging, live streaming. What could go wrong? And at the time of invention and explosive growth, what could go wrong is not usually the top of mind, nor I'm not sure it should be. I think this is why founders are founders, and I'm a trust and safety expert. Founders, by definition, are dreamers. They're optimists. They think about what is possible. And that's awesome. We can all agree that's awesome. That t-shirt, for the time being that it was walking around our campus, was a visual reminder that it's smart to be prepared for misuse the way you would be prepared for use. It's simple, but it's actually a profound reckoning for most product teams and most companies at a certain size. So let's move to lesson 3. It's healthy to be afraid. Imposter syndrome. So in 1978, 2 psychologists first used that term, imposter syndrome, interestingly, to describe the traits in specifically high-achieving business women. Very specific. Since then, I think we can say it's been accepted that it's a common feeling for all genders and all lines of work. One study recently found that as many as 82% of people have felt like an imposter at some point. I certainly have. I wasn't trained for this job. I was always aware that I was not the most technical person in the room and that I was going to have to ask a lot of follow-up questions in order to understand the technology. And honestly, as we've already determined, even with this speech, I was playing my focus music really loud to try to drive out those like not so helpful voices, suggesting that there were more experienced people or more technical people. There had to be somebody better who was going to do the speech. And I imagine those people would also know what to tell you, how to, just exactly what you all need to navigate the next changes. And many, many of you in this room are going to be doing it longer than I'm going to be doing it. And I wanted to give you the right answer. Like, this is it. Take this path and you're going to be good. And as you know, following, like if you're listening to those negative voices and you feel like an imposter, it's not great for raising your hand to do things. It can also make you procrastinate. And I know this. In my career and in writing this speech, I've had to remind myself that I deserve to be here. Matter of fact, I was asked to be in this room. So I want to tell you another little story, and this is about a time that me kind of followed overcoming a major bout of imposter syndrome in my work. A nonprofit partner reached out to me to gather a bunch of people to discuss what would like a wave of suicides that were happening in the area. I was confused. I didn't initially get it. I was resistant. Like, how did this have to do with us? And, I went to the room. I'll give myself credit for that. And then I realized as I was sitting in a circle that there were other people with jobs like mine. And think about it. I did not know that. I did not have TrustCon. I didn't know who else was doing jobs like mine. Thankful. We're not doing this anymore. And, Larry Magid, who you may know, he's well known as a journalist and the leader of Connect Safely. He called the meeting to order. He explained the crisis he was seeing, the patterns he was seeing, and he challenged us. And by the time we left that room, we had come up with a couple really easy and scalable solutions that only us in this room, when we make decisions, they scale. And that feeds into my imposter syndrome because the magnitude, but also like the opportunity. So the solution we had is we hard-coded National Suicide Prevention Hotline into search results and to other areas on the largest platforms of the era. Super easy, super effective, and man, it scaled. So if you notice, I did not share the actual details here. I shared enough so that if you know, you know, and if you don't know, you don't need to know, probably. And I did not want to unnecessarily expose you because the next thing we need to talk about is resilience. Put on your oxygen mask. It may seem that the entire world is watching and second-guessing what we do every day. Certainly armchair quarterbacks are everywhere. And they have opinions. They're not always informed. It may also seem like the entire world is full of trolls, but the loudest and the most extreme get the attention. We know that better than anyone. So what is that metaphoric oxygen mask and trust and safety? It's not be a goldfish, but I like the quote. First, be mission aligned. Ask yourself, why are you doing this work? Let's take this, like you're gonna be mission driven. I know that about you. Every single one of you here, you wouldn't be doing that work. But what else? Are you a problem solver? If so, what kind of problems do you like to solve? I heard somebody once who said she liked to write beautiful, beautiful policy, and it had never occurred to me. Do you like to solve technical problems? Super complex mathematical problems? Do you like to dive into the murky and intrinsically deeply human problems? And ask yourself if your work is aligned with the problems you like to solve. It's common to think that people leave managers, not jobs. But in trust and safety, I think it's more than that. I think it's that we leave when our mission, our personal mission, is out of sync with something larger. It might be just like a company's changing priorities or something like that. But we stay put when we feel mission aligned. And then there are 3 types of protective gear. I'm going to go over them pretty simply because I know there are sessions that deep dive into all of these. One of your practices. Do you have a resiliency model at your company? If not, point your leadership to the new one that TSPA built, Building Resilient Teams page. 2, do you have technology that assumes there's going to be abuse? Are you using technology that assumes people are going to be exposed? Physical. Do you have a good place to do your work where you're comfortable, where you're not worried that colleagues or family members are going to be inadvertently exposed? And have you found your team? Drumbeat on that one. Our teams vary greatly in size. I've worked on teams of 1 and I've worked on teams of thousands. Like, it just varies. And we frequently feel that we're working in a silo. Find at least that one person with whom you can completely and unashamedly be honest. You won't shock. That person's going to get it. Do you have that person? And then finally, take breaks. Yes, you should take breaks throughout the day, and we're about to have a break. So I'm going to speed up a little bit because I think I'm going long. I'm okay? All right. I told you I could get paid to talk for a while once I get going. So let's talk about longer breaks. There are seasons in our lives and seasons in our careers. I didn't realize that early on. It took me a long time to realize that. There have been times in my life when I could jump in completely. I could review shocking content. I wasn't traumatized. Equally, there have also been times when I needed to step back from frontline work. There were times when I needed to shift my focus from being the working on the cure to the problems to working on the prevention. And honestly, there was a time I left a job because I could not take more than a week off. And I left that job because my mom was sick and I needed time, like a sabbatical. And now I'm really thankful, like we can take that time off. In trust and safety though, regardless of your company's generous policy, which I hope you have a generous policy, it feels impossible because we feel like there's not always others to cover our work and help users on the platform stay safe. But it's vital. First of all, your leadership knows you need to take breaks. We build that into our HR policies and our programs and whatever it is, your time off plan, or some of you are lucky enough to have like the no vacation policy. Not me anymore. But it's vital you think about like this concept of taking time, because that's the only way you're going to be able to continue in this work. It is the only way. It wasn't always easy to admit, but I'm happier, I'm more productive when I take leaves. And I believe that for my employees as well. And then let's also talk about the flip side, when those choices are not are necessarily driven by us, when they're not our own choice. It may seem like everybody's getting laid off. It may seem like there are no jobs, because again, that's what gets the headlines, that's what gets our attention, rightly so. And please don't interpret this that I am not sympathetic. I am. If you've recently been laid off, if you are going through a jobs change, or you're under increasing scrutiny because of what your company is launching or what your team is doing. But I want to be up here and remind you just to take a step back. Remember, there are also cycles to this. This is a time of intense change and disruption. And it is part of a cycle. It is predictable, just like abuse. It is predictable this is going to happen. And just as predictable is the cycle's going to shift in our favor again. I promise. So, my last lesson is that curiosity really is the key to longevity. Working in trust and safety is waking up every morning and wondering what happened overnight. Your carefully planned calendar, your to-do list is really just a suggestion. It's a lovely idealized version of what your day is going to be, right? How many of you have ever, like, in 1 year completed more than 50% of your goals? Not me. It always changes. It changes before even halfway through the year. But things, these days change. We're used to that. And let me see here. I've lost my train of thought. Anyways, disruption is to be assumed. It's a giving. And the thing is that these external changes are not the only things that are changing. Okay, there we go. In other careers, and certainly in the companies that we work with, there's a predictable trajectory for careers. There is no predictable trajectory for us. There's no typical academic background or work experience for people interested in trust and safety. There's no one academic path where I'm putting I have a graduating senior that's going to college, and it's like, what major should you be, right? Because it's going to predict success in the future. None of us have that. There's no predictable path. And I guarantee you, even if you had that right degree, there is no specific first job, second job, third job. It keeps changing. And I know my career is not typical, but I'm 100% sure your career is not typical as well. There is such a wide variety of experiences in here, and I think that's cool. If I was to have everybody stand up right now, and I don't think I have time to do that, but like, we would have people, do we? Liberal arts degrees. Yeah. You can raise your hand or stand up. Yeah. How about CS? Computer science? Yeah, come on. Data science? Who went to law school? Yeah, a whole bunch of you. So, okay, I did a little search on trust and safety jobs on LinkedIn before I got here, and over 2,300 jobs showed up. It was, not a very nuanced search. It was really like trust and safety jobs. But the titles were everything from corporate counsel to policy director to law enforcement lead. I didn't ask who else had been in former law enforcement, but I bet there's a bunch of us in here too. It's really cool. Trust and safety communication people we have now. Okay, it's fantastic, seriously. Appreciate the diversity, because one of the most exciting things is that with that diversity means there's no dead ends. It's not like you've gone to level 1, 2, and 3 and then you're done and there's a ceiling. You cannot say that about every career. My career has been full of twists and turns. And like I said, some of that was due to my work life, my personal life. Some of that was just because it all kept changing. It doesn't look like it does. If you need control, if you need predictability, I would gently counsel that perhaps this is not the right career for you. But other than that, this is a great place to be curious, to be intellectually curious, to continue learning technology, to be able to say, you know what, I'm interested in, I don't know, political, like in a presidential election, I'm interested in politics today, but tomorrow I want to really I want to think about health and wellness and that career. It can sound daunting, but the upside is this job is fundamentally never boring. I'm constantly learning. My customers also, let's talk about that. Our customers, our users of our products, they amaze me. They challenge beliefs I feel really strongly about. I can never phone it in. Never. How could you possibly, when it is your job to look around corners? Consider not just the options in front of you, but the options that might be there tomorrow. And the ones that happened yesterday. You got to think about those too. And you have to consider what hasn't happened, but what might never happen. But if it was going to happen, you need to be prepared for it. All that change is terrifying, and it's also so exciting. We have the best jobs in our companies. I'm convinced of it. And I'm also convinced we are ready for this moment. When I was asked to give this speech, I thought, oh, it's because I've been hanging around in this industry for a long time. It's a long time. But I also think it's because I've learned to manage through all this change. I have seen more than I wish. I have witnessed unbelievable change in our industry, in the technology, in the world that we have to do our work. And I have shown myself, or I've learned, I've developed, I'm resilient. And had I written out a roadmap, let's think about this. Elementary school teacher originally. I was constantly being told I was too nice, or I must be very patient. I probably am. But I could never have planned this full circle. I'm having a full circle moment right now at Amazon. Think about it. I was hired to think about what was appropriate content on the largest web directory in the world for children. And now, after a bunch of detours of doing all kinds of other things, I'm right back in that place. I'm not thinking about the internet, but I'm thinking about hardware. I kind of was really interested to see how these things get built. I'd never done that. Hardware, I'm thinking about tablets, I'm thinking about TVs, and I'm thinking about digital assistants, the role of generative AI. And I just lost my notes, but you guys get to see that. Anyways, I could never have planned this. And no matter how hard you try, you aren't going to be able to have a set plan roadmap for your career for the next 5 years, let alone 25. But you have learned some things about yourself, and that's what I want to leave with you. I learned that I'm very good at looking around corners. I'm good at anticipating risk. I'm good at working with a team and appreciating other disciplines and other expertise. And I'm even better. I'm gonna pat myself on the back here, and I I get to say this because I'm looking in some rows with people I've hired. I'm even better at appreciating smarts and skills and expertise in others. I'm exceptional at hiring, and I'm probably even better at mentoring because I can look around this room and see some huge success stories, and I am their biggest cheerleader. So depending on where you are in your career, you may not have seen or developed confidence in your strengths yet. Keep your eyes up, keep your ears open, keep your heart open, please. Recognize that you have been invited to whatever room you are in and that your voice is needed. I do not regret the times I took a leap. I don't regret leaving teaching and doing something I didn't know I could do. I so appreciate the invitation from Charlotte to speak here today. It challenged me to reflect. I'm not the person I was when I defended this decision to leave teaching and enter this crazy field, but I've learned so much about myself. I've been challenged, I've been saddened, I've been hurt, and I'm stronger. And I'm left with a very strong belief in the good and the people in the world. And most people question me on that because I have seen a lot. We all have seen a lot. But I'm also, look at this room full of people. How could I not be optimistic? I'm looking at a whole room full of people who are driven, who are committed, who are brave, and who are resilient. So thank you for being here, and I hope you guys have a great rest of TrustCon.